Kenny, you got on your sneakers.
I do have on my sneakers. You know, that's from my grandmother, too, because before she passed away, I started wearing red Reeboks. And then I said, Grandma, is it cool to wear red Reeboks, you know, like to church? And she said, God don't care what you wear, but I would suggest that you accessorize. So maybe you get different colors and, you know, change your tie up and whatever. So then she died soon thereafter. So today I wear tennis shoes everywhere I go in honor of her, and I look down at my tennis shoes every day, and it makes me smile because I think of my my grandma Mamie. So, and it also makes me stay grounded and to remind myself that I'm just a country boy from Tallahassee, Florida.
Yes, yes, yes. You speak so beautifully of your grandmother and your mother in your book, Take You Wherever You Go. I've been privileged to meet Miss Annie Ruth. Oh, yeah. That's Kenny's mother. She is soulful and beautiful and pure and restrained, but she's always on it, right?
She is.
She's always on it. So when I was reading this, so we're here to talk about this book now, right? How many of you have read this book or read portions of it? Yes? Yes?
Y'all got to get that book. I'll stay here all night and sign them.
Yeah, you're going to sign some copies after we finish talking.
Oh, I am?
It.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to.
Thank you.
But you speak so beautifully about your mother and your grandmother. It is just. So talk about them.
The book, when I start writing it, it's the triangle of my grandmother, my mother, who was 15 years old when I was born, and the teachings of August Wilson. Everything that I know, I can trace back to my mother, my grandmother, and August Wilson. My mother was 15, and she left me to stay with my grandmother in Tallahassee, Florida. She went to South Florida to make a life. She was pregnant with my brother, and my sister was 4. So I had the blessing to stay with Grandma. We stayed on a small farm, no plumbing, no indoor plumbing. We lived with outhouse. Some of y'all don't know what outhouse is, right?
No, they don't know.
Yeah. So we lived like that, but everything I got in my early life was from my grandmother. We would sit on the porch and play games like, that's my car, that's your car. And it was great. And then I later moved to St. Petersburg, Florida with my mother after she ran into my stepfather, whom in the book you'll find I didn't get along with in a great way, but we can talk about that later. But, and then together they made $10,000 a year. And Angela Bassett and myself, we grew up in the same town, St. Petersburg, Florida. We were in a program called Upward Bound. Mm-hmm. Yes. And Upward Bound, I tell you, since 9th grade, I had to take classes on the weekends, and I went to school in the summertime. But Upward Bound prepared low-income families for college. And were it not for Upward Bound, I would not have gone to college. Were it not for Upward Bound, Angela Bassett would not be the great actress that she is. And if you get the book, Angela signed a quote in the book as well. So, Angela's friend, Davida, you're here tonight. I have a book that Angela just told me to give to you. She already has a book. Hey! She already has the book, but where's my publicist here? Make sure you give her this other book. Okay? And she says she's seeing you next week. Okay, good. Okay. Hey, y'all don't know. I mean, we ain't got to talk all about this book, but this woman, I counted the other day, we've done like 10 things together. And in this business, to do 10 things with anybody. And in fact, the first thing that we did together was a play called Blues for an Alabama Sky. You young folks know that, right? It was a play by Pearl Clegg. And Pearl wrote the play, and I was running the Alliance Theater by then. All the stuff is in the book, too. It's just, juicy stuff. But anyway, Pearl wrote the book, and we said, well, who are we going to get to play the lead? And the book was about a very beautiful woman who had been beautiful all her life, and she was supposed to be like 48, 49 years old, and she was just concerned about younger girls being beautiful and life-changing and stuff like that. And I said, well, the most beautiful woman in the world who would be perfect for this would be Phylicia Rashad. She says, I went to school with Phylicia. We went to Howard. Hey, she went to Howard. I went to Clark College, 2 historically black colleges. So
that was one of the most fortuitous meetings of my life. After 8 years in the Cosby Show, there was no work for me.
there was no work
There
for
was
you.
no work for me. A year passed, and I went into Jelly's Last Jam. Mm-hmm. And after Jelly's Last Jam, another year passed, and there was no work for me. Mm. And my agent called and said, this young director is coming up from Atlanta, and he would like to see you. And blah, 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 blah. So I walk into this room to meet this young director. And he's so smart, and he's so clean, and he's so polite, and he looks at me, he said, Miss Rashad, I know you don't know me, but you can ask. And he started naming about 5 people. And I just looked at him and I said,
I was 34.
You were a kid. And I said, and I looked at him, and I just met him. We were about 5 minutes, and he said, but you could ask. And he started naming all these people that he knew that I knew. And I just looked at him and said, I don't have to ask anybody but my daughter, who was 8 years old, right?
Who just left Broadway in St. John's.
St.
She's
John's.
a great actress.
Right.
She's on Billions. Anyway.
And it started this great...
She was 7 then, right?
8.
8. She was 8 years old.
She was 8
then.
years old then.
Wow.
And this started this great artistic collaboration. And I can tell you, as an actress, you wonder if you're ever going to meet that person who is going to be your director. Mm-hmm. That person who sees you as no one else sees you. That person who sees you as an artist capable of many things beyond what most people envision. I met my director. So you were the artistic director of the Alliance Theater when we met.
Right.
And that's where we did Blues for an Alabama Sky. How did you become artistic director? Well, first of all, no. Let's back up a bit. Let's back up to college days at Clark.
You interviewing me, or am I interviewing you?
I'm interviewing you. And I'm
I'm going to interview you. I want them to know about you.
Now I want them to know about you. Okay, so
it's going to be a struggle tonight.
Okay, so let's back up.
Okay, back up.
Clark Atlanta University, and you are a political science major?
Right. First of all, after I left my grandmother, I went to live with my mother, got into the Upward Bound program, and then I was the first class to integrate Northeast High School in St. Petersburg, Florida. Now, in this city, we all wanted to go to Gibbs High School because they won all the state championships. It was culture for our city. In St. Pete, the black folks lived on one side of town, white folks lived on the other side of town. My grandmother and mother raised me to be someone that was going to bring people together. Yep. When we integrated that school, black folks threw white folks motorcycles in the pool. First of all, they had a pool. It was such a crazy experience. The school had modular scheduling, which means they had class like in 20 to 40 minute blocks. And then you had all this free time, like an hour free. But we were away from our homes. So, we went to the 7-Eleven and shoplifted and...
Oh, Kitty Leon.
Yeah, that's who, I embraced that too. You got to embrace the crooked with the straight.
All right, Troy Maxson. All right.
But You know, we didn't need the stuff. It was just like trying to find, we were just bored and away from home. So long story short, the theater program would not allow blacks to be in the plays. They would allow you to be in the plays, but they only did plays where blacks could be maids or butlers. So I spent a lot of time boycotting that. But then I spent time bringing the blacks and whites together. I had some great white friends, great black friends. But all my high school time I was the head of student council. I was very political. When it came time to go to college, I said, the last thing I want to do is be around a world of white folks. That's true. So I said, Mama, I need to go somewhere different. So the people at Upward Bound says, here's a map. The closest historically black college is Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. I said, Grandma had 13 children. All my aunts and uncles are in Tallahassee, Florida. That would not be like going to college. The next thing on the map was Georgia. I was like, Georgia? Okay. Then it was Atlanta. And I was like, Atlanta? Yeah, and there are 6 black colleges there in Atlanta. Spelman is all girls. That was great, though. Morehouse was all men. Clark College was co-ed. That was my favorite word, co-ed, across from Spelman College. I was like, I'm good. So I went to that college because it was the closest historical black college. I went there the first day there, I met Maynard Jackson, who became mayor of Atlanta. He also became a good friend. I spoke at his funeral. He was a great man. And during that time, I also met Samuel L. Jackson. Sam was a professional actor, but working in the theater program at Clark College in Morehouse. Then I met Spike Lee. Spike was studying film around there. And then me and Angela Bassett were friends. So she would come to visit me in Atlanta. And then you had Sam's wife, LaTanya Jackson, who was also a great actress. You had Denise Burst Mickleberry, who's on all of Tyler Perry's stuff now. So we had a little Harlem Renaissance during that, and I was the young political scientist. So I was like, oh, but I'm hanging around all these theater folks. I love this, and so I left undergrad. I went to law school. Something forced me to come from law school because I had a buddy that was in a car accident, so I had to go and see if they're okay. I had to spend a year away from law school. I went back to Atlanta, and I auditioned for the Academy of Music and Theater because I had to spend 1 year working. And this program allowed me to act in Hamlet and Richard III at night, and in the daytime, it allowed me to go into prisons and work with prisoners and teach them acting skills. I did something called People of the Brick, where we went out and worked with the homeless population and taught them acting skills. So I love that. End of the year, the guy said, you want to stay here or you want to go back to law school? I said, no, I'm making $200 a week. This is good. I'm going to stay here. And that started my professional acting, directing career.
You always maintained this connection to people, and you began to use theater as a way to bring people together. This is what I noticed when I came to Atlanta for Blues for an Alabama Sky. You made everybody in Atlanta feel like the Alliance Theater was their personal theater.
Yes.
You did that.
Yes. And you helped me do that because you performed in that play, and then you came back and performed Medea. She played Medea in the Greek tragedy, and she was the best Medea in the world. I mean, it was, I still want to do that play on Broadway with you playing that role. That was like incredible.
How did you get everybody in the theater on board with this concept and initiative of making all of Atlanta feel?
Okay, first
ownership?
of all, it's in the book, but no.
You got to buy the book, okay?
No. Oh man, where was that going? Wait a minute. What was I saying? First of all, Wait a minute. Oh,
How did you get everybody on board with that vision in the theater to make all of Atlanta feel
right.
like this, ownership?
The short story is, when I was at the Academy of Music and Theater, I wanted to direct. And one day, the guy gave me an opportunity to direct a play called The Wishing Place. It was a play where snow fell through the kitchen, leaves blew through the bathroom. It was just crazy, but I loved it. And the guy said he didn't think that I had the skill set to direct. He said, we want you back as an actor. I left the company then. When I left that company, I ran into a woman, Timothy Neer. She said, you should apply for this program, the National Endowment for the Arts Directing Fellow Program. So I said, okay. She said, I'm coming to the Alliance Theater as Associate Artistic Director, and they've just named an artistic director named Bob Farley, who's coming in from Alaska. Fill out the application. We want you to come in as resident director and work on initiatives on diversity, a one-year program. I said, cool. I left the Academy Theater. I wrote this thing. The committee said, Kenny, we want you, but we don't want you to stay in Atlanta. You need to leave Atlanta. I looked at a map. I was afraid to go to New York because I thought it was like crazy and busy, and I was like, I'm a country boy from Tallahassee, Florida. I picked Baltimore, Maryland. Went to Center Stage in Baltimore, Maryland. Worked there a year as a directing fellow. In that same year, I met August Wilson. I went to see Fences on Broadway. For the first time in my life, I'm sitting in a Broadway theater, and I start hearing my grandmother's rhythms. I start hearing my mother's rhythm. It's like we know what it smells like on Saturday when your sister is getting her hair straightened. We know what that is. We can share it with other cultures. We know what it smells like when you're cleaning chitlins. We know what that is. And so I saw that, and I heard my mom's rhythms on the stage, and I was like, theater is more than just entertainment. It is something else. It is something life-affirming, life-sustaining. And I am equal to my white brothers. I am equal. And I saw that in 1987, right? So I see that then. That year passes away. When I finished the fellowship, I was offered 3 jobs in the country. One of those jobs was as Associate Artistic Director at the Alliance Theater, in which I was trying to get in when I wrote the application. 2 years after that, I was named Artistic Director of this $15 million institution. Yes. I was probably the only black person running an institution then. While I was there, I ran into a guy who had donated money to us. He said, Kenny, what are you going to do next? I said, what do you mean? I'm at this theater. I'm making $250,000 a year. This is a great thing, great job. He said, every 7 to 8, 9, 10 years, you should change jobs. Make yourself over. And so when I look back now, I realize that is what has happened in my life. You know, I was with that first company for 7 or 8 years. Then I was with the Alliance Theater for like 8 years, gave my resignation, left in year 10 because the work had been done. And then I started True Colors. And that same year, I got 2 Broadway shows. And the first Broadway show was with you, A Raisin in the Sun with Phylicia Rashad. So I say all that to say, and I talk about this in the book, what I say is that we become prisoners of our situation. We're like, oh, I'm making $40,000. You become prisoners of that $40,000 instead of offering the world what you have. And now I've learned that as a strength. So I haven't been afraid to leave something to try something else. You know, when I did Hairspray Live, that was 800 people on the crew. I've never worked on anything in my life with 800 people. And if you ask me how to do this, I don't know. But when they hired me, I knew I could do it. Right? We can do more than we think. And I don't know where I was going with that, but...
Yeah, because you didn't answer my question at all. I asked you.
Yes. You asked me, okay.
No, because this is a great gift that you have. I mean, you have many great gifts. But the ability to make people feel ownership of art that they themselves have not created.
You know what? One thing that was different that I learned in retrospect, when I was doing it, I was like, it's a good thing. Diversity, inclusion, putting people next to each other. Oh, a quick story about my grandmother.
Yes.
She saw her first play the year before she died, right? And she only saw 2 plays. She saw T-Bone and Weasel, and she saw a production I did of Fences. When she saw T-Bone and Weasel, it's a story about a black man and a white man getting out of jail together. And it's a comedy. She's sitting in the audience. It's maybe 300 people. She is probably the only black woman there. She's from the Southern Baptist Church. She's sitting there, baby. No, don't do that. No, baby. She's saying this out loud, right? No, baby, don't do that. So at intermission, people come to me and say, who is that woman? I said, that's my grandma Mamie. Don't mess with her. So in the second act, Phylicia, everybody goes back in for the second act, and I tell you, all 300 people like, baby, no, don't do that. And so that's what a life lesson is, that is when we sit next to people that are different to each other, we come up with something that neither one of us had. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think to this day, that's what drives me, at least with the live theater work that I do. You know, when I did Raising in the Sun on Broadway, Fences, I just finished Children of a Lesser God, where I learned about the deaf community. And now, at my age, just now being introduced to the deaf and hard of hearing community, it is a blessing. Lauren Ritloff, this is a quick story. Lauren Ritloff, okay. So the producers hired me to do Children of a Lesser God. And I was like, I love that. This is that love story that William Hurt did in that film, and this is great. And they see me beyond race now. This is going to be a white production of Children of a Lesser God.
That's what you told me at first.
Right? That's what I told you. See, I was like, okay. And then I called a friend. He says, well, if you're going to do that show, you know at least one of the characters is deaf, so you need to take some sign language. I said, okay. He said, I'm going to send you 2 people. Both of them have been deaf since birth. Take lessons from a person who's never heard the human voice. I said, okay. I flipped the coin of the 2 people, and Lauren Ritloff won. So I go to meet her in Brooklyn. I am, in my own prejudice, I'm looking for a 70-year-old, introverted, white woman with glasses. I don't know, but I'm like, she's a deaf instructor. That's what, so in my own prejudice. I go in this coffee bar, and this woman is in the center of the room. She's 36 years old, multiracial, and she's like, I'm like, she calls me over, and then we start having a lesson right then. She's like, I'm like, eat? She's like, I said, yes? Yes. And what, so if that's yes, what's no? So I'm learning all this stuff. And then she says, drink? Oh, that's drink. Oh, great. And it makes a W with a finger, and she's like, water. Water, because I was drinking water. And she was drinking coffee, and it was like coffee. So that was our first lesson. Next week, we went to the museum, and she's teaching me color. She's teaching me, like, brown and black and white and pink and red. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm learning another language. This is, like, great. So for every Tuesday for a year, I took lessons from her. I also watched the way people looked at us when they saw that she was signing. I was like, wow, that's the world you did. And we would go into a place, and once they found out that Lauren doesn't speak and that she was deaf, they would turn away from her and look at me. But Lauren would grab her face. No, baby, look at me. And I was like, I love to see a powerful woman. I'm looking at this powerful, beautiful, confident woman she's just deaf. And so after a year, I had Joshua Jackson from The Affair and from Dawson's Creek, because we had done a show together. He said, whatever you do next, I'm in. So I was like, hey, man, look, Children of a Lesser God, we're going to Broadway soon. I don't have a woman to play opposite you, but I've been working with this sign language teacher that I think, and she's never acted before, and she has 2 deaf children, and her husband is deaf. I did a workshop of the play with them. It was so beautiful. And she, in the play, the character has to use her voice, right? Her speaking voice. And Lauren, at 12 years old in real life, had decided not to use her voice since she was 12 because she did not want to be defined on other people's terms. And she didn't know, even if she sounded perfect, she didn't know what that sounded like. Yes. And I was like, that's so beautiful. So long story short, we gave her her first Broadway show this past spring in New York. Never acted before, but she got nominated for a Tony last month, and it was great. So, you know, and I spoke to her recently, so she's going to get some TV and film work now. And it's all we have to do. The last line in that play is, I'll meet you, I'll help you if you help me. And so often, those of us who are different from each other because of race and disabilities or whatever, if we just go half the way to meet each other, I just think it could be a much more beautiful world. And that's what I've committed my life to in all of my storytelling, and I hope it makes my grandmother proud, but that's what it's about. Hairspray was about that. The Wiz was about that. Raising in the Sun, it's all the same story. Like, let's have a richer country and a richer planet. And the next show that I'm doing for Broadway is a play called American Son, starring Kerry Washington.
Oh,
so
yes.
that starts rehearsal in September and opening in October. And we're working on something together, but we're not going to say tonight. But anyway.
Always creating opportunities for other people. Always opening doors for people to enter into. You're always doing that. Not only for people to find work in the theater, not only for people to grow as artists, but for people to engage in and support the arts.
Well, speaking of that, do you remember when I asked you to do A Raisin in the Sun, what you said?
Yes.
Can you tell these wonderful people what you said when I asked Phylicia Rashad, I'm doing a Broadway play of A Raisin in the Sun. I would like you to play the lead female. What did you say?
Why do we have to do that play again? And why do you want me in it?
You said, why do I see you? And I said, it's one thing as black artists that we don't do. We don't revisit our work and make it fresh for a new generation. And that's our responsibility. And sometimes plays become a cliche of themselves. So there was some bad production of A Raisin in the Sun, you know what I mean, that we talk about in the Color Museum. But I thought that people didn't really revisit A Raisin in the Sun. And so when I revisited it, I said, look, let's see how old Lena Younger is. She says her husband died when he was 40, da-da-da-da. I think she is like early to mid-50s. Wow. I think she is strong. I think she is sexy. I think she's this. She's not an old woman, and she's not ready to die. And once we kept talking more and more about it, and she started digging into it, she said, ooh, I got a Lena for you. And she did. And she was the first African-American woman to win the Tony for leading actress in a play. Which was actually a shame.
Well, when they told me that, I said, what happened? Nobody ever was nominated before?
Right.
When they said, you know, you're the first. What does it feel like to be the first? I said, the first? What happened? Nobody was ever. Because before me, there was Cicely Tyson, there was Ruby Dee, there was Diana Sands. You know, before me, there was Esther Roll, there was Clarice Taylor, there was Frances Foster. Before me, there was Rosalind Cash. I mean, before me, there was Eartha Kitt. Before me, there were so many wonderful actresses, and all of them different, all of them beautiful. And I just didn't understand that. But I guess somebody had to be the first.
That's great. Hey, do you have your copy?
My copy's backstage.
Okay.
And
Did I sign your copy?
You signed my copy.
Okay, great.
Shall
Samuel L. Jackson wrote the foreword for this book.
Yes, he did.
He did. I'm not going to read his foreword.
But I love you saying, my life is the answer to generational prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. I think that when we don't realize we're connected to all those who've gone before us, then I think that we're just not seeing the whole picture. My grandmother didn't see a play until the year before she died, but she had strength and vision enough to pray for a better life for me. And I talk about in the book that the women in my life had vision, and unfortunately, the men who were close to me in my life did not have vision. They were practical. Like, get a craft. What you going to college for? Whereas Grandma said, you can be whatever you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And I thought that was very powerful.
Yes.
Yes.
It is. You know what his name means, right? His name is Kenneth.
Kenneth Leroy Leon.
Kenneth Leroy Leon. Kenneth means handsome. Leroy means the king. And Leon means lion. He is the handsome lion king.
And you know what's funny about that? She told me about that maybe 10 or 12 years ago because she studies stuff like that. And I was like, my mom has no idea. I'm sure she didn't think of me as handsome Lion King. She was like, I like the way Kenny sounds. And your daddy named Leroy. And you were born in Leon County.
It works well. Shall we open up to questions from the audience?
You always talk about like finding your own, finding you, the journey of finding you. How did you find yourself?
I was fortunate enough to be reared by a mother who is visionary, who is an artist, who was born in Milltown in South Carolina, came from very humble beginnings, and describes herself as a child, as a girl on a swing who swung as high as she could, looking at the sky, dreaming big dreams. My mother would give us aphorisms to say when we were very, very young. And one of them was, know your own worlds of being and stay within your own element. That's a pretty big statement to give a 7-year-old. She would say these things to us, and she would have us repeat them, knowing that we couldn't possibly understand what it meant, but that she was planting a seed. My mother also did other things. When I was 13 years old, she packed up everything we had, put it in storage, bought tickets on the Greyhound bus, and took us to live in Mexico City. We did not speak a word of Spanish. We did not know a soul. And we lived there for a semester. And we went to school there. It was a turning point in life for me, because now I was in a place in the world in which my being was not defined externally by restrictive laws. I was living in an international city, and the world got very, very big, and I was part of it. My mother also introduced us to art at a very young age. It isn't that one has to become a musician or a poet or a playwright or an actor or a dancer. It isn't that a person has to become those things. But the introduction of artistic disciplines to young people is just indispensable in growing a child who is imaginative and who's creative and who learns to work with other people. It's indispensable. And all of a sudden, you know, you look up and you're doing things you didn't think you wanted. Oh, I'm going to play viola. Okay, I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to learn how to play guitar. These are things I learned to do. Oh, I didn't think I could dance. Oh, I'm going to go study that. I'm going to do all these things. It just opens you up. And how did I find myself? With all of this, I found myself through the practice of introspection, of really taking time to be with myself, to really be with me. Just a little bit of time every single day. Just a little bit of time. And you understand that you are a wondrous creation. Mm-hmm.
My question is, I was in New York over the weekend and I saw Hamilton, and one of the songs from that musical is Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Our Stories. So in the context of the Black American narrative, as directors, as actors, on a major national stage, what level of influence and how do you use your position to reshape the Black American narrative that has been largely told by the majority?
Every day we live the truth of ourselves. First of all, I mean, that's a very important question. But every day you live the truth of yourselves. Being an actor and being a director gives us an opportunity to present that truth that people live every day. My question is, do you need a play to know who you are? Do you need somebody to sing a song for you to know who you are? Do you need something external to know who you are? And if that is so, how could you ever tell a truthful narrative? If you're always looking outside of yourself for answers, how could you ever deliver a truthful narrative? Kenny and I are alike in this regard, and I think I can say this. We believe people are much more alike than they could ever be different. And what we do in our work, whether it's The Wiz or it's Hairspray or Medea, is present that to people.
Right. But also, it's like when I say take you wherever you go, I think about the world that I want, which doesn't put anybody down because of race or culture. My grandmother said to me, if you're going to be in that business, you're either going to probably have to be a snake or a snake charmer. And I'm not a snake. So I'm always realizing that America has this great racist thing around its neck. And then the other thing it has is capitalism. So I want to make money. I want to do what I can to rid the world of the ugly. So you have to understand how it works. So when I work on something like The Wiz, I'm not going to do it the same way a white director whom I respect may do it. No. I have to bring me fully to The Wiz. Right. If I bring me fully to Hairspray, that's why I said when you look at Hairspray, you realize that the most important part in that production, that live telecast, was Jennifer Hudson singing that song about bringing the young people and the old people and the black and the whites together. If you take that out of it, for me, I would not have done that live telecast. But I spent a lot of time on delivering that moment. And that moment, you will get it as viewers in a subtle way, like, wow, you get a piece of, you know me. If you see any production I get, you get a piece of me. So I want to take me fully. I'm going to be the gift to the whole culture by taking me there fully, but never trying to do it for other people or other cultures. I'm doing it for me.
My question is, how did you find the balance of motherhood and pursuing acting?
That's a very good question. I did what my mother did. I took my children with me. I took my children with me.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah. When my son was born, the first job I had after his birth was at the Negro Ensemble Company I took him with me in the stroller, and he sat there in the aisle while we rehearsed, and Douglas Turner Ward didn't even know he was there till we turned around and saw him. I took him with me on the road when we were doing the pre-Broadway run of The Wiz. There were 7 parents of young children. We took our children with us. The problem came, and I'm going to say this because you'll need to know, when they enter school, because it isn't so easy to just take them with you. And then there's another phase of development that you have to participate in and watch very carefully, and that's their education. And that can become difficult for working parents in the theater because of what the hours are in theater. That can become very, very difficult. I don't know that I was able to do as well with my son as I was with my daughter, because my daughter came after my work began in television and I was earning more money and working fewer hours. It's very important. I can tell you that truthfully. But I was there, you know, and I prepared food every day. I prepared breakfast every morning. I made every lunch. I made sure the dinner was right.
I wanted to hear what you both had to say about, for the content creators, the young people who are looking for opportunities and seeing a new landscape in streaming networks or cable or wherever. What do you see the differences, and what opportunities do you see for young people who are looking to make opportunities out of where there weren't opportunities back in, say, the 70s or 80s or early 90s?
Yeah, technology has really changed many things, yes? And allows people to self-produce and self-publish. I look at some of the things and I mean, I have to say, young people are so fearless and so energetic and so worthy. I lament the absence of arts education in schools. Because creativity exists and isn't going anywhere. It's not going away, is what I mean. And when it isn't nurtured and it isn't guided, it seeks its way to somewhere else. But it's going to continue because this whole planet, our life, everything, without creativity, there would be no life. This had to be created, is what I'm saying, you know? So the young people are really, they're wise in ways that younger or earlier generations were not. I think that's probably evolution.
Yeah, I would add to that, there are more outlets now for the writing, but I think we compromise our value system when we don't remind yourself why you're writing it.
Yes.
And if you chase the money,
Yes.
chasing the money would deliver lesser work instead of the real importance of storytelling and passing the stories on. And if we were to trust the values of why you're writing, the money will catch up to that. It might take a little longer, but I promise you it'll catch up to that. So I just wish young folks weren't so quick to sell their stories or to sell because they want to make that paper.
Yeah, that's another thing I wish that we would change. In our time, we were instructed to find that thing that speaks to your heart. Develop yourself in that and give it back to people. Yes?
Yes.
That was the message our generation got.
One of the greatest gifts I had, and a lot of us have been blessed to have worked with August Wilson. He worked with 3 directors, great Lloyd Richards, Mary McClinton, and myself. And when we did Jim and the Ocean on Broadway, he said to me, before the press came out with the review, he said to me the next day, he said, Kenny, I want you to direct the last one. And I said, whoa, two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright says he wants me to direct his 10th play in his cycle. And I said, when is it? And he said, it's April. I said, August, I want to do it, man, but I got to do this Toni Morrison opera. And you know what August said? Man, that's Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
That's Toni Morrison. You got to do Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
And I went on and did the opera. And then on the night that his production of Radio Golf opened at Yale, he called me and said, okay, we're going through that. I want you to come in and take over the show, take it to L.A., and take it to Broadway. And then he found out he had 5 months to live. And during that time, he did not want the press to know. He did not want the actors in the company to know. But I spent some time with him in Seattle during those last few weeks, and he said he taught me some things as a great artistic general that he is that I always remember. And it was not so much about the play, it was about how to live as an African-American artist in our country and how to demand respect and how to embrace the whole culture while presenting yourself to the whole culture. So I don't know why I got on that, but I just felt like...
Because that was in your heart to say.
In my heart to say.
Because another one of the great things that you have done, a great gift that you have given to young generations, is the gift of the August Wilson Monologue Competition. This started a few years ago. What year did it begin in?
August died in 2005, and in 2006, Todd Kreitler and myself, Todd was August's assistant, and we said, man, I can't believe August is gone, man. How do we keep him alive? Mm-hmm. He said, man, let's put these books in 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th graders' hands. I had a company in Atlanta, True Colors Theater Company. We went into one school in Atlanta, Georgia, with no money. We put it into their hands, and now we're in 13 states. And we fly all the finalists from all of these cities, including Chicago. We fly them to New York for the nationals. They get to meet people like Denzel Washington or Dan Radcliffe. They get to see 2 Broadway shows. They get to have a workshop on career building in which I lead. And they get to compete with all these other young folks from all over the country on the August Wilson Theater on Broadway. And I don't know how it happened, but...
Thank you, Kenny Leon.
Thank you, Phylicia Rashad.
And thank you all.
Thank you.